In this intro, I will deal with the influx of faulty misunderstanding that OP has created in macro, because I want to point out that you cannot just assert 1,000 assertions and assume that you will break in a tournament that you want, because all of their semantics requires you to believe that we would not have any society at all, or any functioning society at all, because everyone is pessimistic. Number one, that's outside of the comparative. This is a world comparative in itself that requires you to have a proper burden of proof. You cannot just simply assert that it wouldn't happen, because we already pointed out that they might have some indifferences. The difference is that they will be skeptical within each other, but they still decided to formulate that society in itself, because this is the debate about the dominant norm. So there's a mass cycle of hallucination that's being jeopardized within the status quo. We point out that humans are inherently motivated actors that pick and choose the goodness of each and every one. It's not just being fucking nice that leads to the problem that compounds within humanity's timeline, i.e., and this is clear from our bench, that since we are inherently soft and good, we also expect other people to have the silver lining goodness. That's why we are inherently subjected to confirmation biases with all of the dramatic theatrics by bad faith institutional actors like the Duterte bloc, using the Messiah complex narrative to make people believe that despite of their nature being obviously evil, they are doing this for us. So in itself, the thesis from Gov simply points out that because of the human nature that we have, we are vulnerable and subjected to the worst forms of tyranny, which is the delusion that everyone can be good, despite the flaws that we see, because intrinsically we are good, and that they might be doing this for us, etc. Compare that now to Joseph and Brent's assessment that other actors, which that in itself, when humans know that they are inherently bad, they will likewise feel more skepticism to other actors, which in itself break the cycle of hallucination that remains unresolved under opposition. Because their only response to this is that they will still have like some level of scrutiny in their side. But we told you that on the extent it's ineffective, since majority of people are still subjected towards these hallucinations. And I point out that it's very hard to be educated. It's very hard to stick out of your intrinsically human nature that you are good, that you will be subservient of bad faith policies because you thought that it will be good. So we told you that we take this nature out, and it's easier for us to take this mech out simply because we are not oto-oto, which already leads to two competitive impacts. Number one, this makes the building of institutions far more inconvenient for bad faith actors, and is also responds to the claim that it might be filled with Columbus of Gong-like policies, since there's a tons of scrutiny that will come from every decision-making procedures, and even when they point out that maybe all of these actors can be bad, since all of them are intrinsically bad, and then they will just chase for their selfish interest at the end, we say that it's more likely to result into a deadlock, since their own constituent can trigger early call-outs when things get fishy, and when the results aren't even there. So remember, you're operating at the lens of someone that can be greedy or whatnot as a constituent, and that in itself leads for you to look at the intuition of like being a greedy investor looking for results. And we say that this kind of perspective of constituent is a lot better, because we say that this is how constituent will function in each communities in our side, and this is why they can block out other selfish interests of their leaders by also being selfish themselves. So in two levels, at least to number one, even if they do find common ground, like all of these bad faith politicians, like what we can see right now with the Duterte bloc, to create an initiation and cooperation for deeds, we point out that in itself, it's harder for them to continue, since in itself, they also need to deliver good political outcome to sustain the seats, because the constituents that they are far more, because the constituent that they have are far more distrustful, because they know that what can happen. So unlike in the status quo, the stability of these factions will remain short-term even if they do exist. So it's hard to outcompete one another when your bloc in itself doesn't respond to the needs of a very meticulous constituent. This is why this is the world where they need to be more pragmatic in the policies that they create, rather than using faulty rhetorics that only works when your constituent isn't placed in paranoia, which we say is still an exclusive benefit in our side in how we propagate better outcomes and create clear path of solvency. Number two, this means that the coalition is far harder, like being a DDS, for example, for a constituent, since you will get blasted out immediately by other communities when you support policies that might harm their own interests as a community in itself. So this kind of inter-community conflict will get easily resolved in itself. It is harder for them to formulate this in majority when everyone is placed in paranoia. Number three, Upwhip might say that it can create majority of evil deeds to support bad faith policies, but we told you that if everyone is inherently selfish and evil in itself, the only way for you to operate as a community is to logically get in the middle ground. I.e., we all know that killing other people is bad since we don't want to die. So in itself, these fundamental policies will persist. And even if they do rule by the majority, is what LO pointed out, like DDS supporting extrajudicial killings since they think that it harms their utilitarian goals, we say that in itself, this will be flimsy because they will also realize that as a community, these policies doesn't lead to any prosperous account. And it might also inflict harms in proximity, like how they would fear that unfair procedures might also happen with their sons or with their other communities. So what does this do for the debate? But before that, NEPY. 3, 2, 1. What does this do for the debate? Number one, this means that the policies on our side remains grounded and more justified in how this accounts toward general good. Number two, in terms of racism, it will exist in both sides, but they wouldn't want to waste their own resources for nothing. That means that they wouldn't be subjected to things that makes racism harder to absolve, i.e., believing that only black people are dangerous or that a Jew might steal something from your pocket, because in itself, we apply the standards in a blanket. We all believe that everyone can do this action, so in itself, other communities wouldn't support this unfair targeting because it might also happen within their own community. So I'm not quite sure how their whip will just suddenly fix this mess, since LO's speech doesn't count to the amount of sufficient analysis in order for this to propagate for debate. Number two, what kind of policies would we have then? This is where I take the trade-off, that maybe on the initial aspect, we wouldn't have a broader social good services, like it's hard for you to defend 4Ps when in itself a lot of people are intrinsically self-interested. But what do we have then? We have better cohesion. In itself, the social services aren't working in the status quo, and also at the same time, a lot of people are just unhappy with how it operates, which further fuels tons of discussions revolving around them. But I want to ask, what is the very reason why a lot of individuals are poor? We say that it's because of politically bad outcomes that in itself are propagated by voters that are subjected to delusion, e.g. political dynasties. So in our side, if you look at the timeline on how we sufficiently prove that we have good policies regardless, we say that poorer communities are less likely to be on the same scale that we would have right now, so those policies aren't even needed in our side. It's very important for you to judge that, because intrinsically, if bad beings decided to just coalesce within each other, that means that they realize the importance of their community in order for them to survive. That's why they will still protect these communities in itself.